We may be seated. Good. I welcome you all to the launch of the Corruption Perception Index 2023.
Just check for me.
And in front of us, we have got the program. And during the time, the fact that they are food, and since this is a breakfast meeting, we shall not waste much of this time, but ask the chapter president, chapter international Zambia, to lead the high table to the breakfast break, and then everyone else will join for us to be able to enjoy the breakfast. Then after that, we will proceed with our program. Chapter president, and lead the delegation to the breakfast day. Thank you.
Is it different, Jackie?
Therefore, they are also learning. Please, join. Let's feel free. This is to enjoy the breakfast and also interact, socialize, and get to know each other. The breakfast meeting. So, for our team, and we can see the cards are put on our table, and we can be able to get our card, and then you have, okay, so we can take our seats when we are done and taking this card, and the hotel service will come to our respective tables to send us with our tea.
The Corruption Perceptions Index, also known as the CPI, scores and ranks countries around the world based on how corrupt their public sector is perceived to be. The scores reflect the views of experts or surveys of business people, not the general public. We calculate the CPI using data from 13 different external sources. Transparency International is not involved in the production of any of these 13 datasets. The CPI includes data produced by the World Bank and the World Economic Forum, as well as by private risk and consulting companies and think tanks. Each of the 13 sources rates countries using its own scale. One source rates countries on a scale of 1 to 7, for instance, while another uses a scale of 1 to 100. As a result, direct comparison of country scores between different sources is not possible. Therefore, we transform each score from the original scale into standardized values that show the position of each country relative to others. By doing this, we are able to compare country scores across the 13 different data sources. After standardizing all scores, we then convert them into a scale from 0 to 100, which we use for the CPI. Next, we simply calculate the average of the transformed scores for each country. The average score is the CPI value for each country. In order to ensure reliability of the results, only countries with data from at least 3 sources are included in the CPI. The CPI results are comparable across time back to 2012. This is because when we convert the original data to the CPI scale, we take into account the 2012 parameters, which turns 2012 into the baseline year. Annual CPI results from before 2012 cannot be compared to other years. The 13 different data sources used to calculate the CPI all measure various aspects of corruption in the public sector. This ranges from bribery, the diversion of public funds, and the effective prosecution of corruption cases, to adequate legal frameworks, access to information, and legal protections for whistleblowers, journalists, and investigators. The CPI does not measure activities such as tax fraud, money laundering, financial secrecy, or illicit flows of money. Corruption generally involves illegal activities which are deliberately hidden and only come to light through scandals, investigations, or prosecutions. Researchers, civil society, and governments have made advances in measuring corruption in specific sectors. However, to date, there is no index which directly measures real levels of corruption in all its manifestations. The data sources that make up the CPI ask business executives and country experts questions which are based on carefully designed questionnaires. The CPI scores generally correlate with certain objective measures, including citizens' reported experience with bribery. To ensure that the CPI methodology and results are reliable, the index is regularly reviewed by independent evaluators. Such reviews have consistently shown that the CPI is statistically and conceptually coherent. Ultimately, the CPI is the most widely used corruption measurement indicator due to the wide global coverage, the increased reliability which comes with combining different sources, and the fact that it reconciles different points of view on what constitutes public sector corruption. For more information, please visit www.transparency.org/CPI. The Corruption Perceptions Index, also known as the CPI, scores and ranks countries around the world based on how corrupt their public sector is perceived to be. The scores reflect the views of experts or surveys of business people, not the general public. We calculate the CPI using data from 13 different external sources. Transparency International is not involved in the production of any of these 13 datasets. The CPI includes data produced by the World Bank and the World Economic Forum, as well as by private risk and consulting companies and think tanks. Each of the 13 sources rates countries using its own scale. One source rates countries on a scale of 1 to 7, for instance, while another uses a scale of 1 to 100. As a result, direct comparison of country scores between different sources is not possible. Therefore, we transform each score from the original scale into standardized values that show the position of each country relative to others. By doing this, we are able to compare country scores across the 13 different data sources. After standardizing all scores, we then convert them into a scale from 0 to 100, which we use for the CPI. Next, we simply calculate the average of the transformed scores for each country. The average score is the CPI value for each country. In order to ensure reliability of the results, only countries with data from at least 3 sources are included in the CPI.
Check. 1, 2. 1, 2.
The CPI results are comparable across time back to 2012. This is because when we convert the original data to the CPI scale, we take into account the 2012 parameters, which turns 2012 into the baseline. Annual CPI results from before 2012 cannot be compared to other years.
1, 2.
The 13 different
1, 2.
The Corruption Perceptions Index, also known as the CPI, scores and ranks countries around the world based on how corrupt their public sector is perceived to be. The scores reflect the views of experts or surveys of business people, not the general public. We calculate the CPI using data from 13 different external sources. Transparency International is not involved in the production of any of these 13 datasets. The CPI includes data produced by the World Bank and the World Economic Forum, as well as by private risk and consulting companies and think tanks. Each of the 13 sources rates countries using its own scale. One source rates countries on a scale of 1 to 7, for instance, while another uses a scale of 1 to 100. As a result, direct comparison of country scores between different sources is not possible. Therefore, we transform each score from the original scale into standardized values that show the position of each country relative to others. By doing this, we are able to compare country scores across the 13 different data sources. After standardizing all scores, we then convert them into a scale from 0 to 100, which we use for the CPI. Next, we simply calculate the average of the transformed scores for each country. The average score is the CPI value for each country. In order to ensure reliability of the results, only countries with data from at least 3 sources are included in the CPI. The CPI results are comparable across time back to 2012. This is because when we convert the original data to the CPI scale, we take into account the 2012 parameters, which turns 2012 into the baseline year. Annual CPI results from before 2012 cannot be compared to other years. The 13 different data sources used to calculate the CPI all measure various aspects of corruption in the public sector. This ranges from bribery, the diversion of public funds, and the effective prosecution of corruption cases, to adequate legal frameworks, access to information, and legal protections for whistleblowers, journalists, and investigators. The CPI does not measure activities such as tax fraud, money laundering, financial secrecy, or illicit flows of money. Corruption generally involves illegal activities which are deliberately hidden and only come to light through scandals, investigations, or prosecutions. Researchers, civil society, and governments have made advances in measuring corruption in specific sectors. However, to date, there is no index which directly measures real levels of corruption in all its manifestations. The data sources that make up the CPI ask business executives and country experts questions which are based on carefully designed questionnaires. The CPI scores generally correlate with certain objective measures, including citizens' reported experience with bribery. To ensure that the CPI methodology and results are reliable, the index is regularly reviewed by independent evaluators. Such reviews have consistently shown that the CPI is statistically and conceptually coherent. Ultimately, the CPI is the most widely used corruption measurement indicator due to the wide global coverage, the increased reliability which comes with combining different sources, and the fact that it reconciles different points of view on what constitutes public sector corruption. For more information, please visit www.transparency.org/CPI. The Corruption Perceptions Index, also known as the CPI, scores and ranks countries around the world based on how corrupt their public sector is perceived to be. The scores reflect the views of experts or surveys of business people, not the general public. We calculate the CPI using data from 13 different external sources. Transparency International is not involved in the production of any of these 13 datasets. The CPI includes data produced by the World Bank and the World Economic Forum, as well as by private risk and consulting companies and think tanks. Each of the 13 sources rates countries using its own scale. One source rates countries on a scale of 1 to 7, for instance, while another uses a scale of 1 to 100. As a result, direct comparison of country scores between different sources is not possible. Therefore, we transform each score from the original scale into standardized values that show the position of each country relative to others. By doing this, we are able to compare country scores across the 13 different data sources. After standardizing all scores, we then convert them into a scale from 0 to 100, which we use for the CPI. Next, we simply calculate the average of the transformed scores for each country. The average score is the CPI value for each country. In order to ensure reliability of the results, only countries with data from at least 3 sources are included in the CPI. The CPI results are comparable across time back to 2012. This is because when we convert the original data to the CPI scale, we take into account the 2012 parameters, which turns 2012 into the baseline year. Annual CPI results from before 2012 cannot be compared to other years. The 13 different data sources used to calculate the CPI all measure various aspects of corruption in the public sector. This ranges from bribery, the diversion of public funds, and the effective prosecution of corruption cases, to adequate legal frameworks, access to information, and legal protections for whistleblowers, journalists, and investigators. The CPI does not measure activities such as tax fraud, money laundering, financial secrecy, or illicit flows of money. Corruption generally involves illegal activities which are deliberately hidden and only come to light through scandals, investigations, or prosecutions. Researchers, civil society, and governments have made advances in measuring corruption in specific sectors. However, to date, there is no index which directly measures real levels of corruption in all its manifestations. The data sources that make up the CPI ask business executives and country experts questions which are based on carefully designed questionnaires. The CPI scores generally correlate with certain objective measures, including citizens' reported experience with bribery. To ensure that the CPI methodology and results are reliable, the index is regularly reviewed by independent evaluators. Such reviews have consistently shown that the CPI is statistically and conceptually coherent. Ultimately, the CPI is the most widely used corruption measurement indicator due to the wide global coverage, the increased reliability which comes with combining different sources, and the fact that it reconciles different points of view on what constitutes public sector corruption. For more information, please visit www.transparency.org/CPI. The Corruption Perceptions Index, also known as the CPI, scores and ranks countries around the world.
90, 90,
The Corruption Perceptions Index, also known as the CPI, scores and ranks countries around the world based on how corrupt their public sector is perceived to be. The scores reflect the views of experts or surveys of business people, not the general public. We calculate the CPI using data from 13 different external sources. Transparency International is not involved in the production of any of these 13 datasets. The CPI includes data produced by the World Bank and the World Economic Forum, as well as by private risk and consulting companies and think tanks. Each of the 13 sources rates countries using its own scale. One source rates countries on a scale.
Social media lovers, we have got two Twitter handles. For the international one, it's hashtag CPI 2023. For the international one is hashtag CPI 2023. And for Zambia, it's hashtag CPI 2023 Zambia. For Zambia, our Twitter handle is hashtag CPI 2023 Zambia. We are also streaming live on our page, that's a TIZ Facebook page, and also the Anti-Corruption Commission a Facebook page. We'll soon officially start our program. We are just waiting for the guest of honor to arrive. Thank you so much.
Corruption Perceptions Index, also known as the CPI, scores and ranks countries around the world based on how corrupt their public sector is perceived to be. The scores reflect the views of experts or surveys of business people, not the general public. We calculate the CPI using data from 13 different external sources. Transparency International is not involved in the production of any of these 13 datasets. The CPI includes data produced by the World Bank and the World Economic Forum, as well as by private risk and consulting companies and think tanks. Each of the 13 sources rates countries using its own scale. One source rates countries on a scale of 1 to 7, for instance, while another uses a scale of 1 to 100. As a result, direct comparison of country scores between different sources is not possible. Therefore, we transform each score from the original scale into standardized values that show the position of each country relative to others. By doing this, we are able to compare country scores across the 13 different data sources. After standardizing all scores, we then convert them into a scale from 0 to 100, which we use for the CPI. Next, we simply calculate the average of the transformed scores for each country. The average score is the CPI value for each country. In order to ensure reliability of the results, only countries with data from at least 3 sources are included in the CPI. The CPI results are comparable across time back to 2012. This is because when we convert the original data to the CPI scale, we take into account the 2012 parameters, which turns 2012 into the baseline year. Annual CPI results from before 2012 cannot be compared to other years. The 13 different data sources used to calculate the CPI all measure various aspects of corruption in the public sector. This ranges from bribery, the diversion of public funds, and the effective prosecution of corruption cases, to adequate legal frameworks, access to information, and legal protections for whistleblowers, journalists, and investigators. The CPI does not measure activities such as tax fraud, money laundering, financial secrecy, or illicit flows of money. Corruption generally involves illegal activities which are deliberately hidden and only come to light through scandals, investigations, or prosecutions. Researchers, civil society, and governments have made advances in measuring corruption in specific sectors. However, to date, there is no index which directly measures real levels of corruption in all its manifestations. The data sources that make up the CPI ask business executives and country experts questions which are based on carefully designed questionnaires. The CPI scores generally correlate with certain objective measures, including citizens' reported experience with bribery. To ensure that the CPI methodology and results are reliable, the index is regularly reviewed by independent evaluators. Such reviews have consistently shown that the CPI
It's here, and we should be starting our program officially. I'll ask that we be upstanding as she comes in. Thereafter, we will go straight into the national anthem. I know there are those that are still enjoying their breakfast, but I ask that we be upstanding for the national anthem. We'll sing without the instrument. Stand and sing of Zambia, proud and free. Shall have a word of prayer from Mr. Mono.
Shall we pray? Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the gift of life. We thank you for the many blessings that you keep pouring upon us. We ask you, O Lord, to guide us in this meeting, all the deliberations that we're going to have to enrich our nation. We pray in the name of the Father. Amen.
Thank you so much. We may be seated. So in front of us, the folders, and we have the program with us. Without much ado, at this particular point in time, I'll welcome the Executive Director, Transparency International Zambia, Mr. Maurice Nyambe, to come and welcome us officially. Mr. Nyambe, thank you.
Thank you very much, Director of Programs. I realize that we may need civic education on how to sing the national anthem. But I think we mixed up the verses. Good morning once again. Before I get into my welcoming remarks, allow me to just do some official acknowledgements this morning. I would like to acknowledge the Chapter President of Transparency International Zambia, Mrs. Priscilla Chansa, who is our host this morning. I also would like to acknowledge the Permanent Secretary for Administration from the Ministry of Justice, Mrs. Tandiwe Daka Oteng, who is our guest of honor. The Director General of the Anti-Corruption Commission, Mr. Tom Shamakamba. The Chairperson of the Governing Council of the International Anti-Corruption Conference, Mr. Ruben Lifuka. Mr. Lifuka wears many hats, so today he's representing the IACC. Acting Director General of the Financial Intelligence Center, Mr. Victor Zimba. I'm not sure he's in the house already. Deputy Director General of the Drug Enforcement Commission, Ms. Ronet Chanda. I also want to acknowledge the Judge in Charge at the High Court General List, Mr. Charles Zulu, who is representing the Chief Justice this morning. Also the Director of Administration at the Zambia Police, Deputy Police Commissioner, Mr. Mubita Nawa, who is representing the Inspector General, other senior government officials in attendance, Program Manager from the Embassy of Sweden, Mrs. Malala Mondela. We also have the representative of the United Nations Resident Coordinator, Ms. Noria Mashumba. We also have a representative from the United States Embassy, Ms. Fatima Sao. Representative from the National Democratic Institute, Mr. Lavupiri. We have members of Transparency International Zambia in attendance, led by our chapter vice president, Professor Chilufya. And I particularly also just want to acknowledge the mother of TIZ, Mama Esther Mulaisho, who's seated right over there. You can have a chat with her later to find out why she's the mother of TIZ. But thank you so much for being here, ma'am. Representatives of other civil society organizations, colleagues from the media, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you all to yet another important event on the annual calendar of Transparency Zambia. We have gathered here today to witness the launch of the 2023 Corruption Perceptions Index, which is taking place simultaneously across the global Transparency International movement under the theme Corruption and Injustice. Many of you in this room will know that the CPI is Transparency International's flagship measuring index for corruption within the public sector at global, regional, and national levels. It therefore goes without saying that the CPI launch is often preceded by high levels of anticipation to see whether the perception of public sector corruption has improved, stayed the same, or worsened in the preceding year. As TIZ, we are therefore excited to have you all joining us for this launch. And it is our hope that the results that will be reviewed today will give all of us an indication of where we need to target our various anti-corruption interventions. For Zambia in particular, the CPI has been a good indicator of both the efficacy as well as the challenges of different anti-corruption interventions, and has in all instances served to validate the results of a local survey that TIZ conducts every 2 years in conjunction with the Anti-Corruption Commission, which is the Zambia Bribe Payers Index. Given that the latest Zambia Bribe Payers Index was launched only last year, we are very keen to see how some elements of it will relate to the CPI results that will be reviewed in today's launch. Ladies and gentlemen, TIZ is cognizant of the fact that with every CPI launch, the results are received differently by different stakeholders. In the past, we have seen governments disputing the results, interpreting them in their own way, or indeed praising them, depending on what the results show. We have also seen other stakeholders question the CPI methodology in a bid to justify why they do not agree with the results. Now, to address some of these concerns ahead of this launch, TIZ trained journalists from both private and public media in order to familiarize them with the CPI methodology as well as the interpretation of its results. It is our hope that this training has given our colleagues in the media the ability to engage more authoritatively on the subject and to have a better discourse with stakeholders who will inevitably give various reactions to the results that will be reviewed today. As I conclude, allow me to reiterate TIZ's hope that the 2023 CPI results will serve as a point of reflection for us all and allow us to recalibrate our anti-corruption interventions towards more tangible and measurable outcomes. So with these few words, it is now my honor and privilege on behalf of the TIZ board and the general membership, and indeed on behalf of the TIZ members of staff, to officially welcome you all to the launch of the 2023 Corruption Perception Index in Zambia. I thank you for your attention and may God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Maurice Dambe, for that. We will now move to a presentation on the 2023 Corruption Perception Index, Global and Regional Highlights. And this presentation will be made by Mr. Mika Halwindi, who is the Climate Change, Environment and Sustainability coordinator at TIZ, please.
Good morning to everyone, and riding on all protocols as mentioned by my executive director. I know everyone is itching to find out Zambia's score, so I'm the one in between what our score is for 2023. I'll be focusing on the regional and global highlights of the 2023 CPI. Can IT just help me with my presentation, please? So the global and regional highlights of the 2023 Corruption Perception Index. Next slide, please. So it has been 20 years since the adoption of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, the UNCAC, and 190 countries have united under it to stop corruption. The 2023 CPI shows, though, that 80% of the world's population is living in countries where the CPI score is below the global average of 43 out of 100. As you would know, for the CPI, 0 is a very low score, meaning very corrupt, and 100 means very clean. For the 25 countries that top the index, the percentage of people that live in those countries is just 10%. So it shows you how many people are living in jurisdictions where corruption is an issue. So the 2023 Corruption Perception Index shows that corruption continues to be a challenge that directly and indirectly harms people globally. Next slide, please. In terms of what is happening in the countries, globally, we see that 118 countries remain the same when it comes to their CPI score. And over 2/3 of these countries globally had a score below 50, which presents a dire picture when it comes to the fight against corruption. 34 countries, they are marked in red, regressed, and we have 28 countries that showed significant progress in this year's CPI. Next slide. In terms of the top performers, for 6 years in a row now, Denmark is still the top scoring country with 90 out of 100, followed by Finland with 87 and New Zealand with 85. Next slide. However, Transparency International, we note that they still trouble at the top. For decades now, top scoring countries on the CPI have been enablers and facilitators of corruption, particularly illicit financial flows. For example, the Netherlands, which had a score of 79, has a poor record of prosecuting companies that bribe foreign officials. So this is speaking to exporting corruption. Iceland, which has a score of 72, up to date has failed to take action in the fish rot scandal since those allegations emerged. So we can see that not everything is perfect for the top scoring countries. Next slide. What about the bottom performers? The picture still remains the same. If you recall last year's CPI, which was around security and conflict, we see that most countries that are scoring low scores on the CPI and the bottom performers are characterized by conflict, restricted freedoms, and weak democratic institutions. So Somalia is the lowest scoring region this year with 11, followed by Venezuela, Syria, and South Sudan with a score of 13. When we look at the roadmap of regional highlights for the CPI, which is the next slide. Okay. So this slide shows the percentage of countries in a particular region that scored below 50. So again, the CPI is measured 0 to 100, so 50 would be the middle point CPI score. The highest scoring region, when you look at the global average, is Western Europe and the EU, and 13% of countries in that region scored below 50. The Americas, which is Latin America and North America, 66%, which is 2/3 of countries in that region scored below 50. Eastern Europe and Central Asia, we see that 95% of countries in that region scored below 50 on the 2023 CPI, and this presents the highest percentage in terms of countries in a region falling below 50. For Asia Pacific, we see that 68% of countries in that region scored below 50, and 78% for Middle East and North Africa. Finally, our region, Sub-Saharan Africa, 90% of countries scored below 50. So, Hamililo, I'll ask you to move to the slide above the map. Sorry, I think the slides. Thank you. So regional highlights, looking deeper into what is happening in the region. As I indicated, the top scoring region continues to be Western Europe and the European Union region, which have an average CPI score of 65 out of 100. But it should be noted that this has dropped from 66 out of 100 for the 2022 CPI. We see the top performer there leading the countries as Denmark with 90, with the lowest scoring country being Hungary. So this region, as stated, continues to be undermined by the weakening of the systems for checks and balances. But also in this region, we see that there is a lot of facilitation and enabling of corruption through illicit financial flows and transnational corruption. Next slide, please. Eastern Europe and Central Asia have a regional average score of 35. The top scoring country in this region is Georgia. And then we have Turkmenistan with 18 out of 100. This region is characterized by dysfunction, rule of law, a rise in authoritarianism, and systemic corruption. This region is the second lowest scoring region globally. The next region is the Americas, and we see that they have an average score of 43 out of 100. The top scorer in this region is Canada, and the least scoring country in this region being Venezuela with 13. In this region, the 2023 CPI shows that the issues to do with the lack of independence of the judiciary in the Americas. Middle East and North Africa, which is characterized by high levels of political corruption that are undermining anti-corruption efforts. We see that the United Arab Emirates is topping this region with a score of 68, and Syria is trailing with a score of 13 out of 100. The next region is Asia Pacific with a regional score of 45. And this is the second highest scoring region. So it just gives you perspective from 65 to 45 in terms of the average score. And in this region, we have New Zealand, which is leading the region with a score of 85, and North Korea with a list score in the region of 17. So the scores in this region reflect the lack of delivery by elected officials on the anti-corruption agenda and commitment, as well as a reduction in the civic space in the region. Last but not least is Sub-Saharan Africa with a regional average of 33. Our region continues to be the lowest scoring region when it comes to average scores of the CPI. And we can see that Seychelles is the top scoring country in our region with 71, and the least scoring country is Somalia with 11. So the CPI findings show that severe underfunding in the public sector have worsened corruption, specifically issues to do with illicit financial flows. So in line with the 2023 CPI's theme, which is corruption and injustice, the 2023 report shows that there is a correlation between corruption and injustice. So the report shows that corruption breeds injustice, but also in countries where the justice system is weak, it enables corruption. So this graph demonstrates and illustrates that. On the x-axis, we have the CPI score from 0 to 90, and then the y-axis, it's showing how government, or if government officials are sanctioned for misconduct from 0 to 1, so 0 being the worst and 1 being the best. So we can see that in countries where there is corruption, there's also a low sanctioning of public officials who are found abusing or have misconducted themselves. The next slide is also showing a correlation between corruption and injustice, but using persecution. So under most corrupt justice system, we see that those with power, those with connections are able to evade persecution and the justice system. So the x-axis still shows the CPI score, and the y-axis the equal treatment and absence of discrimination. So again, we see that in countries with a low CPI score, there's very little, if any, equal treatment, and there's high discrimination when it comes to the justice system. Corruption watch list specific for our region SSA. Countries to watch the two, Gabon and South Africa. So for Gabon, it's pretty ironic that the country is one of the most prosperous and stable countries in Central Africa, but they have a score of 28, and the CPI links this to issues to do with political corruption. For South Africa's score this year is 41, and the country marks 30 years since the end of apartheid, and will be going to the polls. So despite this, we have seen that the CPI score for South Africa has declined over the past 5 years. So in light of those findings, what are the global recommendations? So the first is to strengthen the independence of the justice system. And here our core is to reduce political interference in the justice system and ensure that all appointments and recruitments are merit-based. The second recommendation is to make justice more transparent. Here we're calling for access to information and disclosure of relevant information to make justice systems more transparent. The third recommendation is to introduce or to strengthen integrity and monitoring mechanisms, so strengthening whistleblower protection systems, strengthening integrity committees, and implementing declaration of assets, especially for high-ranking officers in the judicial system. The fourth is to promote cooperation within the justice system, acknowledging that the justice system is quite complex. We call upon stakeholders to collaborate and cooperate to ensure the strengthening of our justice systems. The fifth is to improve access to justice, especially to the marginalized and the vulnerable, to ensure there is no discrimination in the dispensation of justice. The sixth and final recommendation is a call to expand avenues for accountability in grand corruption cases, especially in countries where the justice system is weak and unable to. The call is for countries with stronger justice system and the rule of law to intervene and help the fight against corruption, especially transnational corruption cases. Ladies and gentlemen, here ends my report for the global highlights, and I hand over to the Director of Programs. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tamika, for that informative presentation on the findings regarding to the regional level. At this particular point in time, I don't know if the mic is okay. Okay. At this particular point in time, I'm sure people would want to know how Zambia performed in 2023. And I would invite to the podium our Advocacy and Research Manager, Mr. Bright Chizonde, to come and make that presentation so that we know whether we have stayed at the same point, whether we have declined, or maybe we have improved, and what has led to the improvement. Mr. Chizonde.
Good morning once again. I'd like to write on the protocols already presented by the Executive Director. I'm waiting for my presentation to come. Okay, so we're looking at Zambia's performance in the 2023 Corruption Perceptions Index. I'll be very brief in my presentation, but I would like to start off with just briefly going through the CPI methodology so that we can all be at the same page as we go through the data sources so that we can understand where the results are coming from. First of all, I think this has already been mentioned. The CPI scores 180 countries and territories around the world based on perceptions of public sector corruption. The score reflects the views of experts and surveys from business people and not the general public. The first thing that you hear about the CPI is people will say, oh, it's just based on perceptions. But whose perceptions is very important. These are experts. So just like we do research, when you do a key informant interview study, you ask people on what they feel or what they understand is happening in terms of particular subject. So if you ask people who are experts dealing with government in terms of procurement issues, has the bribery situation changed? What's happening in terms of bribery to get a contract? What they're giving you is actually reality. Yes, it's a perception, but they have experienced what they are talking about. So it's very important to take note of the meaning of perceptions. Obviously, we have 180 countries, and then these are based on expert perceptions. And then the third important note is that we are dealing with public sector corruption, so it doesn't extend to private sector corruption or illicit financial flows. In terms of the methodology of calculating the CPI, So the CPI is calculated using data from 13 external data sources, including the World Bank, World Economic Forum, private risk and consulting companies, think tanks, and others. It's important to also understand that the way the CPI is calculated, it is not a study that Transparency International goes to collect data on. The data is collected by different reputable institutions in their normal, for example, when the African Development Bank wants to extend credit, so they will have to do country institutional assessment. In their assessment, they will have specific corruption questions. And it is those specific corruption questions or governance questions which will form a data source that will then enter into the CPI for that particular country. So therefore, if you critique the perceptions in the CPI, then you should critique all the development assistance, all the assessments that these reputable institutions are doing, because it's only the governance and corruption questions we pick to generate the CPI. So it is a weighted average, meaning we just get the average of all of these different data sources after standardizing the scores. And then lastly, in terms of scale of measurement, 0 means most corrupt, 100 means very clean. So we have, and then we have 100 countries in the CPI itself. So the rank of the country represents where the country stands with respect to the other. That is what the rank means. But the rank is based on the CPI. So how you perform on the CPI is what determines your ranking. This is the graph that everyone has been waiting for. So Zambia has improved its CPI score by 4 points, from 33 out of 100 in 2022 to 37 out of 100 in 2023. We have also therefore improved our rank by 18 points, from 116 out of 180 countries in 2022 to 98 out of 180 countries in 2023. Very important thing to note that this is the very first time that Zambia's CPI score has improved within the past decade, within the past 10 years. So you can see our performance from 2016 to 2023, that we are at 38, declining 37 to 35 in 2018, and then 34 in 2019, and then we had a period of stagnation. So that's 2020, 2021, and 2022 at 33 out of 100, and then we have that improvement in 2023 from 33 to 37 out of 100. Obviously, the question is, what has informed this jump? It's called a jump, right? This great improvement. Before I look at that, let me look at the comparative performance with other countries. So we selected a few countries to compare Zambia to, just to see where we are performing. One important thing to note, first of all, despite the improvement, is that we are still at the bottom compared to all of these countries. So Zambia has not performed better than Botswana, Rwanda, Namibia, South Africa, or Tanzania, who are our close neighbors. So it means that we still have a long way to go. Another important thing to note is that our performance is still less than 50 out of 100. That's also very important. I call 50 the midpoint value, right? 50 is a midpoint value. So we need to improve. If we want to say we are improving, then we need to improve beyond 50, and that is our hope in the coming future. But the score for Botswana reduced by 1 point, while South Africa's score reduced by 2 points, that's in 2023. Rwanda and Tanzania's score increased by 2 points, while Namibia maintained a score of 49 out of 100. Zambia is the best performer in this group, though at the bottom, and sometimes that happens, right? Even in the class, we are the best performer. In this group, 4 point improvement, that is better than all of these countries we are comparing to. Now allow me to look at the data sources so that we can look at where this performance has come from. So we are looking at the different data sources. For Zambia, we usually use 9 data sources. Historically, I think we changed from 8 to 9. This year, I'll mention that in advance that we have only 8 data sources. Something happened with one of the data sources. But looking at the data sources here in the table, we are comparing our progression 2022 and 2023 in terms of the specific data sources. So for context, if you're not understanding where we are now, this is like the report form for the class. You want to know English performance, mathematics, science, social studies, or creative work, and everything else. You want to look at the individual subject performance because that is what has informed the average, which is the CPI, which is the overall performance. So if you look at the African Development Bank country policy and institutional assessment, we see a decline or a reduction in performance from 34, bearing in mind all of these are also standardized, so they are out of 100. So from 34 to 32 with respect to that particular data source. Then the Bertelsmann Stiff Tank Transformation Index, we see a 12-point improvement from 21 to 33. The Economist Intelligence Unit country risk service ratings, we have stagnation there, 37, so no improvement. The Global Insight country risk ratings from 35 to 47, which is another 12-point improvement. The PRS Group International Country Risk Guide, we have stagnation, 32. The World Bank Country Policy and Institutional Assessment is also 27, no change there. Then we have the World Justice Project Rule of Law Index, which has also remained the same, 36, and the Varieties of Democracy Project, 49.54, which is a 5-point improvement. So just to take note that the data from the World Economic Forum Executive Opinion Survey for the 2023 CPI generated results which were invalid, therefore giving us a missing value. So it's not a 0, it's a missing value. So when we are computing then the average, which is the CPI, we actually reduce the sample size from the original 9 to 8, so that the average is out of 8 now instead of 9, which we did last year. So that is the general performance. So in the 2023 CPI, the Bertelsmann Stiff Tank Transformation Index, the Global Insight Country Risk Ratings, and the Varieties of Democracy Project all indicated improvements, while the African Development Bank Country Policy and Institutional Assessment indicated a decline. The rest of the other data sources remained constant. So we start with the first measure and try to track to see what we feel is informing these changes. So what has informed the decline? First is the African Development Bank Country Policy and Institutional Assessment, which declined by 2 points. This one assesses accountability of the executive and accountability of public employees within the executive for the use of public resources, administrative decisions, and results obtained. Generally, this is on accountability with respect to 2 specific dimensions. Obviously, to note is that this accountability can actually be enhanced by transparency in decision-making, public audit institutions, the work of public audit institutions, access to relevant and timely information, and public and media scrutiny. If you want to improve these 2 dimensions of accountability, that's what you need to look at. So this is where the decline has come from for this particular measure. So the 2-point decline can be attributed to number 1, limited accountability of the executive to oversight institutions due to sluggish follow-up action on audit reports. This is a perennial problem now that we all know. The audit reports come out every year and we see how much money has been misappropriated, misapplied. People go to Parliament Park and then they are brought there. Then what happens beyond that? Nothing really happens beyond that. And so that is what we feel is informing that particular decline in that respect. And then 2, limited access of civil society and the media to information on public affairs. We know that there is the Access to Information Act number 24, 2023, which was just recently new, but this actually will only move if we implement and move forward in terms of the particular act. Number 2, the second measure is the Bertelsmann Stiff Tank Transformation Index, which had a 12-point improvement. This one assesses the extent to which public office holders who abuse their positions are prosecuted or penalized, and government ability to contain corruption through putting in place integrity mechanisms. So there are two drivers for this particular data source. One is prosecution of corruption cases. The other one is integrity mechanisms. So in other words, we have made some progress here. The initial progress is just the establishment of the Economic and Financial Crimes Court. Of course, there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of being operational and speeding up the wheels of justice. But the second one, which we have observed for some time now, is integrity mechanisms such as integrity committees, gift policies, service charters that have been proliferated in many public institutions. We are saying that this impact is now coming to show on the CPI. The third data source is the Global Insight Country Risk Rating, which had a 12-point improvement as well. This one assesses the risk of individuals or companies facing bribery or other corrupt practices in carrying out business. Basically, this is a measure of corruption in the business environment. So with respect to securing major contracts, to being allowed to import or export a small product to obtain everyday paperwork. The 12-point improvement is therefore consistent with our 2022 Zambia Bribe Payers Index survey, which indicated an improvement in the bribery situation in Zambia's public sector. So what the ZBPI is saying, there's an improvement in the overall measure. This is what is reflective on this particular data source. The third one, the corruption questions in the Varieties of Democracy project, which had a 5-point improvement, measure the pervasive levels of political corruption. The 5-point improvement can therefore be attributed to number one, reduced political corruption due to the elevation of the fight against corruption following the change of regime. And then number two, we are saying this is consistent with our analysis of the performance of the UPND administration in their anti-corruption and governance promises within the first 24 months of office. So I'm referring you to that analysis for you to get context of what we feel has led to reduction in political corruption. We also have data sources, of course, which have remained stagnated. So asking questions of why we are stagnated here. The Economist Intelligence Unit Country Risk Service Ratings, 0 in terms of change, measures various aspects of corruption, including the misappropriation of funds by ministers and public officials for private and political party purposes, and bribery in the public procurement process. I can even end here to say no improvement with respect to those aspects of corruption. So there's limited punitive action following the publication of audit reports. Of course, lack of legislation to regulate private interest and political party funding. These are the gaps that we see there. The PRS Group International Country Risk Guide, again, no change there with a 0, measures corruption in the form of excessive patronage, nepotism, job reservations, exchange of favors, secret party funding, and suspiciously close ties between politics and business. So in other words, no improvement with respect to those aspects of corruption. So there's limited action to address these aspects of corruption in the CDF program, for example, procurement and recruitment of public sector workers, and then lack of legislation, as I mentioned earlier, to regulate political party funding inform this particular outcome. The World Justice Project Rule of Law Index also remains 0, focuses on the extent to which government officials use public office for private gain within the public health system, regulatory agencies, the police, and the courts. So it's sector specific. So this stagnation results therefore indicate that there has been limited progress in addressing corruption within this sector. So with the exception of the police service, of course, which showed some significant improvements in the 2022 ZPPI. So gaps remain in the health system, regulatory agencies, and the court system. Then the last data source, which had invalid results, the World Economic Forum Executive Opinion. So as I mentioned earlier, this was conducted between April and August 2023. However, only 91 countries had valid data for the corruption-related questions required for the CPI calculation. So Zambia was not one of them. Therefore, the data on Zambia was not valid, consequently reducing the number of data sources we use from 9 to 8 for 2023. Let me now turn to the recommendations specific to Zambia, the contextualized recommendations. So government should accelerate the implementation of the Access to Information Act number 24 of 2023 in order to make justice more transparent in out-of-court settlements and enforcement, as well as to make legal procedures and administrative rules more open to public scrutiny. And then number 2, government should take action to limit excessive patronage, nepotism, job reservations, exchange of favors, secret party funding, suspicious cross ties between politics and business through enacting a law to regulate political party and campaign financing and promoting merit-based appointments. As you can see, the recommendations are drawn from the different analysis of the data sources, as well as from the global recommendations to put them into context in the Zambian situation. Let me now read through the last 2 recommendations. Number 3, government should accelerate corruption prevention efforts such as whistleblower protection and declaration of asset, interest, and liabilities, especially for public officials in the public health system, regulatory agencies, law enforcement, and the court system. And then the last recommendation, government should expand avenues for accountability in grant corruption in order to further reduce political corruption and the prevalence of bribery. This can be achieved through strengthening the independence of the justice system and promoting cooperation among law enforcement agencies and other stakeholders in the justice system. I thank you very much.
Thanks, Bright, for that presentation. And well, after a decade of trying, at least despite us being still at the bottom, but there is some improvement. This calls for us to still strengthen a lot of mechanisms as far as the fight against corruption is concerned. I know there could be some questions, but we'll hold on until we are done with the next presentation. At this particular point in time, I'll take this privilege to invite to the podium the Permanent Secretary, Administration, Minister of Justice, Mrs. Tandiwe Daka Oteng, who is going to give us a keynote address. Yes, you are welcome.
Good morning to you all. I hope you can hear me. Seems to be something wrong with the mic. I'd like to recognize the judge in charge of the High Court of Zambia for Lusaka under the general list. I would also like to recognize the Director General of the Anti-Corruption Commission, the Director General of the Drug Enforcement Commission. I'd also like to recognize the Chapter President, Transparency International Zambia. I'd also like to recognize the Executive Director of the Transparency International Zambia, as well as if there are any representatives of government ministries and institutions present, representatives of cooperating partners present, private sector and civil society organizations, representatives present here, distinguished guests, members of the press, may I simply say ladies and gentlemen. I would like to mention from the outset that I'm here to represent the Honorable Minister of Justice, Mr. Mlambo Haimbe, State Council MP, who would have wanted to be here but has been called to perform other national duties. It is an honor for me to officiate at this launch of the Transparency International 2023 Corruption Perception Index, CPI, under the theme Corruption and Injustice. The publication of the CPI is a landmark moment that we always look to every so often. It affords us an opportunity to come together and look at our country's progress or shortcomings in the fight against corruption, which is one of the topmost priorities of the new Dawn administration. Distinguished guests, allow me on this auspicious occasion to acknowledge Transparency International Zambia for taking the lead every year in sharing the CPI results for Zambia. Indeed, if left unchecked, corruption can erode the integrity of society and its institutions of governance. It is therefore imperative for all stakeholders to join hands in countering corruption. Ladies and gentlemen, since forming government, the new Dawn administration remains resolute to its commitment to zero tolerance to corruption. This is demonstrated through the upholding of transparency and the rule of law, promoting a culture of integrity, ensuring effective prosecutions, and the recovery of stolen assets. These have been but some of the topmost interventions for government. We therefore welcome the progressive findings from the 2023 CPI, particularly that we have just been informed that Zambia has improved its CPI score. This is indeed a significant milestone that reflects that our government is enhancing good governance and accountability through tackling corruption as well as engendering justice and the rule of law. Ladies and gentlemen, the fight against corruption has been a crucial policy agenda for this administration since its very first day in office. We are therefore making important strides towards enhancing good governance as well as strengthening institutional and legislative frameworks so as to promote transparency and integrity. This, we believe, has contributed to the reduced overall levels of corruption. You will recall that one of the first measures taken by this government was to address corruption was to launch Project Recovery with the intent to recover assets obtained illicitly and corruptly. Government has also established the Economic and Financial Crimes Court in order to ensure swift dispensation of corruption cases. Moreover, government has pushed forward important legal reforms that have paved way for higher levels of transparency, including the most recent enactment of the Access to Information Act number 24 of 2023. This is an essential step to enhancing accountability of the state towards its citizens. This law will allow citizens to access public information upon request, thereby inherently limiting the extent to which wrongdoing, maladministration, or indeed corruption might thrive. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to also assure all stakeholders involved in fighting corruption gathered here today through the media that government is firmly committed to building on this progress in order to have a corrupt-free society where our citizens work honestly, business conduct themselves with integrity, public services are provided without paying bribes, and the public contracts are undertaken in a transparent manner. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, allow me to inform the nation that in order to provide a holistic national anti-corruption framework, Cabinet approved the revised national policy on anti-corruption in December 2023. This is yet to be launched. The next immediate steps, therefore, is embarking on an inclusive implementation of this important policy. I want to also mention here that government will, going forward, provide the requisite leadership and support to ensure that the CPI score continues to improve. May God bless you all, and I thank you.
Thank you so much, PS, for that speech. We'll quickly move on to another speech by law enforcement agencies. And specifically here, I'll invite to the podium the Director General Anti-Corruption Commission, Mr. Tom Trevor Shamakamba, to come and give us their reaction. Sir, you are welcome.
Good morning to everyone. Kindly allow me to ride on the protocol which have been established. I'm delighted to be with you today, and I express my in the fight against corruption with the revelation made that Zambia has not only increased its score on the Corruption Perception Index, but has also significantly improved its ranking. The CPIS score from 33 in 2022 to 37 in 2023 is a testament to the collective effort of our nation in the ongoing battle against corruption. This remarkable ascent from 116th place in 2022 to 98th place in 2023 among 180 countries underscores the dedication and hard work of all stakeholders involved in anti-corruption efforts. Several factors can be attributed to have contributed to this positive shift in Zambia's CPI score. These include, among others, judicial reforms that saw the establishment of the Economic and Financial Crimes Court, as this has played a pivotal role in enhancing justice, ensuring that those engaged in corrupt practices are held accountable for their actions in a fast manner. This highlights the government's commitment to strengthening the rule of law and ensuring that justice is seen to be done. The Commission is also working together with the judiciary and other stakeholders to ensure smooth operationalization of the Criminal Procedure Code, which, among others, ensures and provides for the completion of corruption and financial cases within 5 months. And please, may I just say something about the 5 months? There will be criminal sessions, just the way we hold criminal sessions in the High Court. So if you are a lawyer, you are a corruption suspect, you'll be appearing for 1 month in court until your case is finished. If it doesn't finish, then it will spill over to the other month, just like that. So please, that is what is going on. The second is the role being played by integrity committees, which foresee the putting in place of integrity mechanisms in workplace. The IC program, which is being spearheaded by the Commission in collaboration with its stakeholders, have witnessed the putting in place of gift policies, whistleblower mechanisms, and service charters. These reflect a proactive approach to prevent corruption at its roots. Private sector involvement in the fight against corruption. The efforts being made to reduce the risk of bribery within the business environment by engaging the private sector to develop anti-corruption and bribery mechanisms is a significant milestone. This engagement drives at creating a fair and just business landscape, promoting a level playing field for all and ensuring that economic activities are conducted with integrity. The Commission's effort towards recovery of ill-gotten wealth is in itself a major deterrent in fighting this scourge. Criminals should never be allowed to enjoy looted assets. As such, the Commission will continue to play both the conviction-based forfeitures and non-conviction-based forfeitures. The increase in public awareness activities have also played a role in informing members of the public of the negative effects of corruption and ensuring that citizens are empowered with ways of reporting, identifying suspected cases of corrupt practices, and reporting to law enforcement agencies. In light of this year's CPI focus on the relationship between the rule of law, injustice, and corruption, I wish to inform you that the Commission is developing a bill on asset declaration for all public officers. This initiative aims at enhancing transparency among public office bearers and strengthening law enforcement operations. This will further facilitate and enhance the conduct of lifestyle audits. The Commission also recognizes the vital role of efficient whistleblowing systems in uncovering corruption and financial crimes. Therefore, we are set as a Commission to launch our first online anonymous whistleblowing system next month, to complement the existing platforms such as the toll-free, WhatsApp, and email reporting system. A review of the Public Interest Disclosure Act of 2010 to strengthen the legal protection of whistleblowers who play a crucial role in the fight against corruption is equally underway. In addition, you may also wish to know that the Commission is reviewing the Anti-Corruption Act number 3 of 2012 with a view of putting in place stiffer penalties for corrupt practices and bringing it in line with some of the provisions in the Constitution, among others. I also wish to inform the audience that there is greater collaboration between the Office of the Auditor General and ACC. So the Auditor General is giving us all the reports that they are doing, whether they are interim or final. And as I speak, the Auditor General has given us 2 interim reports of some activities covering major ministries in this country. And from there, we are actually conducting investigations. As we reflect on the CIP report, we must remain vigilant and committed to the ongoing battle against corruption. The Anti-Corruption Commission reaffirms its dedication to investigating and prosecuting cases of corruption in respect of who is involved, whether you are a serving government official or not. And we encourage continued collaboration among government bodies, civil society organizations, the private sector, and citizens to consolidate and build upon our successes. Let this improved corruption perception index score be a source of inspiration and motivation for us to continue our journey towards corruption-free Zambia. Lastly, I wish to inform TIZ that yes, the results are good, but we are not excited. We want more. As Chizonde said, we want to see that we are above 50. And I can assure you, the audience who are here, that we shall work hard to be there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Director General ACC, Mr. Tom Trevor Shamakamba, for that speech. At this particular point in time, I know people have banked a lot of questions and reactions to what has been presented, both from TI and also from the government side. So at this particular point, we will open it up for plenary, for people to be able to ask questions, reactions, and perhaps recommendations on what has been presented. Now, how we will proceed is that we will start by giving an opportunity to the cooperating partners to react to what has been presented. It could be a question, it could be a comment. Colleagues from TI, Z, I'll need assistance in terms of moving the mic. Anyone who is available? Anyone who is available to help me move the mic? No, not the chair for the IACC, but my colleagues from Secretariat. So we'll start with the cooperating partners, and we will give this opportunity to SIDA to react. Then after that, NDI will also react to what has been presented so far. So they are seated on the other table, this side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. May I say all protocols observed, and I am speaking on behalf of Sweden, not SIDA. Yeah, maybe just to say that I personally am quite elated with these results. I was telling Maurice during breakfast that I felt like my heart really pumping, looking forward to seeing these results. I think it's a major achievement, and I would like to commend the government of Zambia for this achievement and other key institutions like the Anti-Corruption Commission, the FIC, the DEC, and others. But I would also like to commend TIZ and other civil society organizations that have been very consistent in being a watchdog and keeping the government on their toes, as it were. Like the DG said, I think we are happy, but perhaps cautiously optimistic about the results. We are still below 50 over 100. And so my comment would be that we need to look at the reasons that have been presented to us around the stagnation, what is causing the stagnation, where there is decline, what is causing that, and to take a very close look at the recommendations and put the necessary measures in place. We need to build on these results to make sure that we can get above 50. And I think as cooperating partners, we're also pleased to see that the interventions over the years of supporting the government and civil society are beginning to yield results. And I think I speak for many of us when I say that we are committed to continue to support Zambia in improving these results and making sure that we continue with zero tolerance for corruption. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Monica Emsch from the National Democratic Institute. I'd like to obviously echo the comments of my colleague from Sweden. Really incredible work done by the TIZ team, and we commend you for the effort that has gone into this report. Likewise, we are encouraged by the results that are presented in this report, recognizing the contributions from government and from civil society and from citizens themselves in achieving this progress. I think that the report and the data behind it provides a basis for the work that we look forward to partnering with TIZ on in the years to come. Let's not rest on these positive results. There's still a lot to be done. And I think that the data and some best practices from some of our neighbors in the region who have also made strides can help guide that work together. So we look forward to future collaboration amongst civil society actors, with government, and with citizens as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Morning. I'm Fatima So from the US Embassy. And maybe not to speak on what my colleagues have already touched, but a big pam-pam to TIZ and the government and the different law enforcement agencies to ensure that Zambia has actually taken steps to increase its CPI for this study that we have seen. For me, maybe 3 points that I would need clarity on. The first one maybe is, I know already TIZ and the ACC have both mentioned that we as Zambia need to have a target of 50. But my question is more on what are the different efforts that the government will put in place to ensure that we reach this 50? Looking at the different recommendations that have been set by TIZ, what are the major ones that the government will be focusing on, so that maybe even as cooperating partners, we can know where to channel our resources as we interact with the different government agencies? The other one for me is on the anti-corruption policy. So the Minister Oteng, mentioned that the policy will soon be launched, but the question is when exactly will it be launched, so that we as cooperating partners can track it and know when to cooperate with the government and different agencies on its implementation. The other one for me is on the Criminal Procedure Court and the 5 months. I know the ACC Director General mentioned there's when someone is taken to court, then it spills over to the next month, but maybe I did not really get what his explanation was. Maybe to ask it from how I understood it, does that mean even when 5 months elapses, that person or that individual will still be taken to court in the 6th month? And then if that is the case, are we still sticking to the 5-month timeline? Will it just be continuing, then it goes to 7, then it goes to 10, then it's a year? Then what is the improvement in that case? Maybe just clarity on that one. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Noria Mashumba Matauri. I'm coming in from the UN, and I'm joining my colleagues from the development partners to congratulate Zambia and TIZ and all the other stakeholders and the quasi-government institutions for these encouraging developments. And I'm also perhaps emphasizing what my colleagues have already stressed on, that the journey continues with these improvements. We are looking forward to seeing, I think, perhaps maybe traction with regards to some of the developments that, important developments that you've already shared with us. DG, it's really exciting to hear you speak of the asset declaration and related legislative framework. We hope that maybe in the coming year or so, this will be fully developed and implemented, and I'm sure that it will go a long way in enhancing the encouraging developments that were shared today, and also the Anti-Corruption Act you mentioned, that there is also a review of that. We hope that in the coming year as well, we'll see the developments with regards to that to enhance what has already been shared here. Otherwise, we are supporting you fully in whatever way we can as the UN, and we are saying well done, good job.
Thank you. Bob, would you want to chip in?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Bob Liebenthal. I'm representing the Partnership for Transparency, which is a US-based CSO focusing mainly on citizen engagement in anti-corruption. Let me join others in saying all protocols observed. My only observation, I think it's very welcome to see this improvement in the CPI, and particularly welcome to hear the government representatives and the ACC speaking in very specific terms about the improvements that they are making in the anti-corruption apparatus, specifically the court system, asset declaration, and the promise of a anti-corruption policy. My only concern is that one aspect I'm not hearing much about is citizen engagement in anti-corruption and indeed in service delivery more generally. And I'm just wondering whether that's something that will feature maybe a little more in policy and in government action going forward. What I have in mind specifically is not just organization of CSOs, but organization of community groups at district level in monitoring service delivery and the potential for corruption in that area. So let me stop there and thank you very much. Thank you, TI. Thank you, government, for this excellent event and the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I ask that perhaps we make this the first round. I have seen Mr. Ifuka also wants to fall on the cooperating partners. Now I'll allow him to join the cooperating partners because he wears many hats, so I don't know where he's belonging right now. But you can proceed. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think I'll speak as Zambia country lead for Chandler Foundation, which is slowly, I'm being very careful because the DG is close by, slowly working on an MOU to work with the Anti-Corruption Commission, but is also in the process of working with the Governance Department under the Ministry of Justice around issues of open government partnership. Just again to congratulate TI Zambia and also the Zambian government for the improvements made. This is significant, except that we're just going back home. Zambia in 2013 scored 38, so we had 37. So as the DG said, I think when we hit the psychological barrier of 40, we should have a big party. At the moment, we're still doing what we've always done, below 30. So we're still bottom of the class, but there is hope, and I think we can do more. We should still use this as a platform to maybe do a little bit more. I just wanted to say, I've heard the sentiments around improving the legislation, which is great. I've heard about the policies. But that has been the default position. We have a problem with corruption, we amend laws, we strengthen institutions, and yet our score still remains below 40. Maybe we should also invest in integrity building, in dealing with the behaviors of people in the public service. Improving integrity would not always be through the enforcement of laws. It's using other soft skills. It's developing the right codes. It's capacity development within the public sector. And that is why I think we need a comprehensive anti-corruption strategy, not only one that is premised on litigation of cases, which is important, but also building integrity. So I hope that as we develop all these strategies, we're also looking at how do we change the behaviors of people beyond just the arrest. I wanted to say to DG, when ACC goes into an institution, they are investigating one or whatever number of individuals. It is not the role of ACC to reform the institution. There have to be insiders within that institution who are keen to reform the institution. So we have to then look at a whole of government approach so that we're not just strengthening the ACC, for instance, we're also looking at an important component of the Office of the Public Protector as an argument. The Office of the Public Protector deals with maladministration, and DG will be the first one to indicate that in Zambia, everything that's not working well, including inheritance, is because of corruption. So we've put corruption label on everything, and we put pressure then on an establishment with less than 400 or less than 450 members of staff. I think we need to look at how do we strengthen all these other components of government which could help in building integrity, but also fighting corruption. My last point is on the famous 5 months. I'm happy that the DG is enthusiastic. I said to him at breakfast, at the end of the day, the evaluation point is not whether justice was delivered in 5 months. it will be on the quality of the judgment. Did we secure justice for the victims of corruption? Corruption is not a victimless crime. Where it occurs, there are victims, and whatever we do, therefore, we have to think about protecting those victims. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will allow, I picked 3 questions from what has been said so far. The rest were recommendation. I'm sure the rapporteur is on point to capture those. There are 2 questions that were directed to Minister of Justice. One, I think, was on which recommendations of those that have been made will government concentrate on for us to be able to move the score for 2024 better. Then the second one was the National Anti-Corruption Policy. When exactly is it going to be launched? And the third question should have been for ACC, issues related to the criminal process. I think there is need for clarity. And also perhaps the fourth one, much as it was more of a comment and a question from Bob, issues of citizen engagement as far as behavior change is concerned. Perhaps the PS can begin to respond to the 2. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to say to the lady, please don't get me fired. I'm permanent secretary and not minister. Thank God he isn't here. So just picking up on the questions that came up. I'm sorry, I forget the name. Fatima, okay. So we will continue as government, just as I indicated in our statement, because that is our role as government, to improve the policy framework, the institutional framework, as well as the legislative framework. In terms of the recommendations that came directly from this meeting, is for us to implement the Access to Information Act. So at least we have come up with the act. Now what remains is for us to implement. I know that this act is not yet in force. We are waiting just to put in the administrative measures. That is, as government, this is under the Ministry of Information, just to be ready with all the administrative issues before we can start to enforce this piece of legislation. I also, just to add to, the issues of policy and legislative framework, the improvement of them, I also take on board the recommendations coming from Mr. Lifuka on building integrity. I think, we can put in all these measures, but if we don't change the mindsets of public workers and the public at large, then we are not doing as much. So we'll take on board your comments. It is gratifying to note that at least most of us institutions have integrity committees, and that's the platform through which we can put in these issues in place. In terms of the launch, I would like to indicate that, as you are aware, this is there are many stakeholders to this matter. The launch of the policy, the anti-corruption policy. So consultations are still being carried out between the various stakeholders, and we should be able to inform you and the public on when the launch will happen. I think that was all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. The Anti-Corruption Commission.
I think on the issue of the 5 months, as I was saying, I don't know whether, Fatima, you have attended what we call criminal sessions. Basically, criminal sessions, what it means is that if the court asks you to appear before it, either you'll be there for a month attending, and surely you are saying the case can't finish in 1 month. So the judge will tell you, the judge at the onset will tell you, these are the directions I'm giving. How many witnesses do you have? That is for the prosecution. You as an accused person, how many witnesses do you have? You will line up your witnesses. They will give you a date. Maybe a week, they will say for the prosecution, you have 10 witnesses from this date to that date, it's your period. Then for the defense, from this date to that date,
this is your period. Agreed, agreed. Whether your father is dead or your mother is dead, sorry to say that, but you have to find time. Unless otherwise you are declared by the doctors that you are beyond the fitness, you can't stand. So the whole idea is that you will be holding criminal sessions for 5 months. And now the question is, are we not going to be finishing cases within that 5 months? And it doesn't mean that it will only be one magistrate who will be holding criminal sessions. Like, for example, we take February. There will be about 5 or 6 magistrates with different cases all holding criminal sessions at a go. So in terms of delayment of cases, it will not be there. And on our part as anti-corruption, we are also saying, let's have reasonable time to do investigations so that we fit in these court sessions. Yes. I hope I've made myself clear. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll move to the second set of questions. What we'll do is that we'll take 5 questions, 3 from this group, then 2 will come from the people that are following us online. We need to accommodate them. They have also sent some questions. We still have some minutes for this particular session. So questions, comments? Questions, comments? Okay, the DG?
Over the issue of integrity and desensitization, as you are aware, ACC, we have departments that are doing integrity and sensitization. So we are not only focused on arresting people, prosecuting them, no. There are instances where systems or procedures in ministries, government departments or agencies are not so good. So we even make recommendations to the various permanent secretaries to say, look, these procedures or systems are not sitting well. Can you revise them? Or can you do something to it? Like, for example, certain institutions have even abandoned physical contact with the customers because we have advised them that these physical contacts are actually breeding grounds for corruption, and they have abandoned that. So you have to do things online. So I think that goes to what Mr. Rufuka was saying. We are doing what we can do. We are not just interested in oh, there's corruption there, moving, arrest people. No. Sometimes we even recommend actually to permanent secretaries or directors within the institutions to take administrative measures against their staff. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I've seen 2 hands. How we'll proceed, we'll start with Mr. Maimbo. You thought I forgot his name. We'll start with Mr. Maimbo. Then I saw a hand there. Then Dr. Habasonda will be the last on this segment. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Daniel Maimbo. For me, it's a practical one, maybe diverting from what was presented, and it's directed to Anti-Corruption Commission. Living in Zambia, it's so very easy to meet a corrupt person. Very easy. And we know the institutions that are extremely corrupt. I can actually mention that you know that the police is corrupt. You know that actually under the judiciary, madam, the prosecutors are extremely corrupt. You know that a number of institutions, corruption is endemic there. But it would appear like these people do corruption publicly. I mean, in the sense that they will attempt to bribe me without even knowing who I am, which to me appears like the presence of Anti-Corruption Commission is not felt. There is no doing corruption without looking over the shoulder, thinking that maybe the person I'm talking to is corruption, from Anti-Corruption Commission. Now, my question is, do we have innovative ways, like clandestine ways of catching? Because we're talking about, and I agree with Mr. Lufukad, that we need to change the mindset. Some innovative ways of making sure that a Zambian fears to be corrupt. I can say here that I spent some time in Rwanda, Kigali, and I can assure you that it is so difficult to be corrupt. People fear. They don't know who they are talking to. Because there are a lot of mechanisms that they have put in place that are innovative and leading to the culture of fearing to be corrupt. Can I get it from the Director General Anti-Corruption Commission whether we really have innovative ways of addressing corruption? Because it seems we're doing the same thing the same way, and then the same institutions that we have always complained about being corrupt have continued being corrupt. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We move on to the lady, then yes.
Thank you very much. I thought had been passed over. It's a quick one and directed at the DG. I know that maybe these legal processes of developing policies and frameworks can take time, but I'm just interested in maybe just finding out, seeing that this is one of the key contributors to prevent on the preventive aspects of corruption, the assets declaration and lifestyle audits. What are would you have any kind of like time frames for it? And are there any kind of highlights, if at all, that might be shared that are in the bill, if at all? Thank you very much.
Give the mic to Dr. Havasonda.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I think my comments are twofold. The first will probably be a question, and the last will be a comment. The question really is, as Mr. Maimbo has raised, doesn't the law enforcement agencies meet the ordinary people who tell stories about what they suspect is wrong in society? Because I walk around and people will tell you stories about what they suspect is wrong. Somebody is building a 3-story building, and the institutions that are supposed to enforce law and order are also getting on with their lives. Why don't they get to sniff and find out if those people really have income to do some of these big projects or lifestyles that live, which is now the lifestyle audits? Do they have to wait for someone to come? Or they don't move around to hear the stories that we do here as ordinary people? I do believe that one of the things that we need to pay attention to, and this comes to my comment, is that the fight against corruption has two sides, the supply and demand side. And I seem to see that government and the other institutions fighting corruption seems to be strengthening their side of the story. I'm afraid, DG from ACC, you haven't done enough mass education on the side of us, the citizens. I think you need to fund your department for education around anti-corruption a little more. I think government needs to invest a little more in awareness raising, because every day you will send someone, for example, to go to get a license, and you have sent them, they will say, Lamdala, we will get this license very quickly. Just send me a little more than what we need to pay. I want to know what to do. That indicates to you that it seems to be life or business as usual. So for me, I want to appeal to cooperating partners. I want to appeal to government agencies. Can we reinvigorate education against corruption? You can go in the university and deploy your people there. They can be students just looking out for corruption events. You can deploy your officers in the banks as bank tellers. Their role is corruption, not necessarily tellering in the bank. You deploy your people in all the institutions the way UNIP used to spy. I'm not saying you should start spying, to spy on citizens. I am glad if you, yeah, you need to find a way of spying if we have to defeat corruption. So I do think that, yes, we still have inefficiencies in our public sector, and these seem to encourage malfeasance around provisions of service. Otherwise, congratulations. It's refreshing to hear that Zambia has made a few steps in a long time. As Mr. Lifuka has said, I was TIZ president from 2013 up into 2017. There was no such news. So I wish to congratulate my colleagues and all of you from government that finally we have made some steps forward. Please don't come back next year and say we have declined. Yes, please maintain it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We take 2 questions online. Zanji, you can read those questions and perhaps highlight which institution they are directed to.
Okay, so the first question is from Patrick Nkoma, and it says, how extensive is the stakeholder consultation or participation in the ongoing Anti-Corruption Act review? Lusaka is not Zambia. Those acknowledgements of this or that having been a product of wide and extensive consultation with stakeholders must not only be on paper, but actual participation of citizens. That's the first question. Then Patrick Nkoma again has another question, and he says, do we have a mechanism for following up cases of victimization of whistleblowers, and how effective and efficient are integrity committees? So the rest are just comments on recommendations and reactions to the CPI score.
Okay, thank you so much. I can see that the DJ is trending in this meeting, not outside, because all the questions that I have captured are actually directed at him. But of course, other institutions are free to help him respond to these questions. So we'll give this opportunity to the DG to respond to a number of, I've captured 5 questions that you need to respond to.
Maybe I start with, I think the 2 questions are similar.
Thank you.
But it will be difficult for me to respond to them in such a gathering. I would invite the 2. We can come and maybe they can even contribute, because there are certain things that we want to put in place, more or less like I was saying, we do spy. So we want to extend that spying methodology to wherever you are complaining. So I think that is the summary. Yes. So, no, I just want to share with them in my office to say this is the program that you have. Because maybe one thing I can even say is we've been planning to be putting people orders. Because there is also a concern of other officials in government entities, what they are doing. In terms of spying, what are they doing? What corruption is taking place in the borders? And there are other areas, especially where you have touched with the police. There is something that we want to do
there is a vehicle going with anti-corruption officers. What should it have? Should it just have personnel inside them? I hope you understand where I'm going. Yes, so we cannot disclose what we want to be doing for the future. Then regarding the laws that we want to amend the time frame, this is a EU-sponsored project. So we have been given a mandate that by June this year, before June, those should be done and they should be submitted to Ministry of Justice, PS. And thereafter now they will pick it up. And I can even speak that actually the draft, the amended draft Anti-Corruption Act, it left my office last week. They are just going to finalize it together with the declaration of asset. So once they polish up with whatever corrections we have done, I'm pretty sure that by end of February I should send it to PS. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The other issue was somebody saying Lusaka is not Zambia. The whole issue is that, look, once these drafts are done, PS will circulate it to other stakeholders. It will be published in the media, newspapers, and the citizen, government gazette, and the citizens will be free to comment, improve or make improvement to them, that kind of situation. So we are not saying it will be just concentrated to Lusaka alone. No. Every Zambian should participate. Just as I encourage that, look, don't watch corruption and not report. We are encouraging people to say wherever you are, report corruption. And there was an issue of whistleblower. Please, the issue of whistleblower, we are taking it very, very seriously. I will not mention of a guy who interfered with a whistleblower. I had to order him being locked on Friday, and I ensured that he was released on Monday into court. And that is how serious we take that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, DG. As an interested party on issues of asset declaration, I want to believe what is taking place is internal consultations, and when those documents are submitted to MOJ, I'm sure there will be external consultation. Thank you so much. I'm sure the public was wondering after getting the news that there is a bill on asset declaration. Thank you. Due to time, I don't know if there is any burning question or comment. Just one or two. Okay, I see none. It's now my rare privilege to invite to the podium the TIZ chapter president, Mrs. Priscilla Chikonde Chansa, to come and give us a speech for the 2023 CPI media and recommendation, and thereafter we'll move straight to the official launch of the CPI, the Corruption Perception Index 2023 Summary Report. Chapter President.
Allow me to ride on the protocols already established. It's still morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to also extend a warm welcome to you all to this very important launch of the 2023 Corruption Perception Index. As we have seen from the results, the 2023 Corruption Perception Index reveals that only 28 countries around the world have significantly improved their transparency levels. For 34 countries out of 180, the situation has in fact gotten significantly worse. While in an overwhelming 2/3 of countries globally, there has been a stagnation. What these overall results tell us is that the progress made in strengthening the legislative frameworks and implementing anti-corruption measures at different levels have often failed to reflect real and significant improvements on the ground. suggesting that there remains yet more work for all of us gathered in this room if the war against corruption is to be won. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of the 2023 CPI report is corruption and justice. And the analysis has revealed that a global trend of weakening justice systems is reducing accountability for public officials, which has allowed corruption to thrive. We have also established that corruption and the rule of law are closely intertwined. When justice can be bought or be politically interfered with, the laws stop applying equally to all, and saving private interests rather than the common good becomes the norm. This year's CPI also shows mixed results in Africa, with significant improvements in a few countries. However, most African countries showed stagnation, and this resulted in the continent maintaining its consistently poor performance at global level with an average continental score of 33 out of 100. However, some positive developments have been achieved for individual cases. In 2023, a record 5 countries in sub-Saharan Africa have achieved their highest ever CPI scores. This includes Seychelles, the top performer on the continent, our neighbor Tanzania. Another neighboring country, Angola, retains the record for the best 5-year improvement in the CPI score globally, jumping up 14 points since 2018. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the results also portray an encouraging picture for Zambia, with the country improving its CPI score for the first time in a decade. The 2023 CPI score for Zambia has improved from 33 over 100 in 2022 to 37 over 100 in 2023, and consequently improving the rank by 18 places, from 116 over 180 countries in 2022 to 98 over 180 countries in 2023. Zambia's corruption situation is now comparable to the year 2017, when the CPI score was at 37 over 100. This means that the current administration's policy pronouncements and actions against corruption, in collaboration with all other stakeholders, while not perfect, have contributed to a reversal of the past 6 years when Zambia's score has been in decline. It is, however, important to note that this 4-point improvement in the CPI score for Zambia, although unprecedented and therefore worth commending, does not mean that the prevalence of corruption has reduced to zero. It certainly does not mean that government and other stakeholders should relax when it comes to fighting corruption. Corruption continues to be endemic in Zambia as the country remains an underperformer in the sub-region. Countries such as Tanzania, South Africa, Namibia, Rwanda, and Botswana all performed better than Zambia in 2023. Zambia should therefore continue on this path of progress by further improving the legal, policy, and institutional frameworks, strengthening governance institutions, and scaling up the implementation of corruption prevention measures at all levels. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a more detailed analysis of the data used to derive the CPI score for Zambia reveals that Bertelsmann Stimfang Transformation Index, the Global Insight Country Risk Ratings, and the varieties of democracy project all recorded significant improvements, while African Development Bank country policy and institutional assessment recorded a marginal decline. The rest of the indicators remained constant. Through our local analysis of all these data sources, we have attributed the 2023 CPI improvement to the establishment of the Economic and Financial Crimes Court, the proliferation of the integrity mechanisms such as integrity committees, gift policies, and service charters, the reduction in risk of bribery in the business environment, and the minimal reductions in political corruption. TIZ therefore calls on the current administration and all other stakeholders to do everything in their power to build on these improvements in order to continue the trajectory of improvement in all these data sources. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to give more specific recommendations in line with the 2023 CPI findings for Zambia. There's specifically 4. Firstly, the government should accelerate the implementation of the Access to Information Act number 24 of 2023 in order to make justice more transparent in out-of-court settlements and enforcement, as well as to make legal procedures and administrative rules more open to public scrutiny. The government should take action to limit excessive patronage, nepotism, job reservations, exchange of favors, secret party financing, and suspiciously close ties between politics and business through enacting a law to regulate political party and campaign financing and promoting merit-based appointments and recruitment. Thirdly, the government should accelerate corruption prevention efforts such as whistleblower protection and declaration of assets, interests, and liabilities, especially for public officials in central government, the public health system, regulatory agencies, the policy service, and the court system. I think the issue on declaration of assets, interests, and liabilities is one issue we want to see the government really act on. Fourthly, the government should expand avenues for accountability in grant corruption in order to further reduce political corruption and the prevalence of bribery. This can be achieved through strengthening the independence of the justice system and promoting cooperation among law enforcement agencies and other stakeholders in the justice system. It is our conviction that implementing this recommendation will contribute towards more favorable anti-corruption outcomes arising from an improved policy, legal, and institutional framework for the fight against corruption and the promotion of good governance. As TIZ, we reiterate our continued commitment and availability to collaborate with the government and all other stakeholders in fighting corruption. And we call on you all to wage this war with us. It is now my honor and privilege to declare the 2023 Corruption Perception Index for Zambia officially launched. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Chapter President. So to officially launch, we'll also take a picture and we invite the 2 high tables to just come in front. And I have with me the booklets here to pose with so that we can be able to take a picture. I'll ask that we stand in front of this backdrop. I'll also ask this table to come in front. The booklet. The camera people, the specialists, please, you can arrange the people. Zanj, are we okay? Yeah, maybe we can put chairs in front quickly. I think the line is too wide, people may not be seen. That. Thank you so much. The media people, before you pack, we need to officially close this meeting. So as we close this meeting, allow me to invite to the podium Transparency International Zambia Vice Chapter President, Professor Chilufya, to come and officially close this meeting. Then after he closes, we still have plenty of food. Where I come from, we don't believe in throwing away food. People can still partake as we interact and network. Prof.
As we come to the close of this 2023 CPI launch, may I take this opportunity to thank all of you for coming to this launch. In a special way, I wish to thank our stakeholders for their support. We look forward to working with you, collaborating with you, and I look forward to seeing all of you next year for another launch, and hopefully a better launch with a better score and a better ranking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. The meeting is officially closed at this particular point in time. People are free to network and also partake of the food, which is still plenty on the food bay. Thank you so much. Until next year, again in January. See you.
Have you ever wondered which countries have the most corrupt public sectors? We do. This is why every year we put together the Corruption Perceptions Index. We know you want names, but let us tell you first about something crucial that is often linked with corruption: impunity. No matter where you are in the world, you probably believe that corrupt people almost never pay for their crimes. When justice can be bought with bribes or influenced by politicians, laws become nothing but ink on paper, allowing wrongdoers to get away with anything. They benefit from this, but eventually we all suffer. Justice systems around the world are becoming weaker. It's trending, if you will. How can we prevent this? It starts with governments respecting and protecting the independence of institutions like the courts and the police. They must provide them with the resources needed to investigate and punish corruption. Only then can we end impunity for corrupt people. And now the names. On the top we have Denmark, Finland and New Zealand, and on the bottom Somalia, Venezuela and Syria. Curious to know more? Check out the complete results of the Corruption Perceptions Index 2023 and learn why corruption continues to thrive around the world at transparency.org/CPI. Have you ever wondered which countries have the most corrupt public sectors? We do. This is why every year we put together